Good example of one of my best client cases. I actually had a situation probably about 10 years ago now where I had 5 clients who lost their wives to cancer in as many months, which was just a bit of a weird scenario. But I've always taken the view of trying to assist them as much as I possibly can to try and take the pressure off them as much as possible. So basically dealing with things like accumulating information from death in service or various pensions and policies that the deceased might have had, but basically trying to say to them, look, you've got enough on your plate, let me deal with all the stuff you don't need to deal with, and we'll sort things out accordingly. And that might have led to various subsequent actions of consolidation, etc., but principally trying to take as much pressure off them as possible. So in terms of what we did, would have focused on requesting information for the various providers and former employers, perhaps. And one in particular I can think of where the gentleman's late wife worked for a major merchant bank, and there are a number of things that we had to address there from her former employment, which included things like shareholdings. And in fact, because it was an American bank, some of those shareholders were overseas shareholding. So it was a question of trying to collect the information as best we could, trying to find out what we need to do thereafter, and from his perspective, what the next steps were. The very interesting scenario, and in fact, he is one client now who's on the platform, coincidentally, but one of the interesting scenarios with him was that from when his wife died, so when I had most of the information collated, which might have been, I can't remember, a month, 6 weeks later, we were having a meeting, a relatively short, brief meeting was what I attended, and I ran through the figures, and although he was quite controlled and up until that point, as soon as I told him what I thought his wife's estate was worth, he literally burst into tears. And it was a really interesting scenario and reaction, and he's been a long-standing client ever since. Interestingly, she was the client first, and he became the client as a result, if that makes sense. And that probably is going back 10, maybe 12 years. I mean, it's a really interesting scenario, and that was a particularly good example. I think the most challenging part of that exercise, which is something that happens every day of the week, nothing has changed, is trying to get responses from third-party companies swiftly and coherently. And it doesn't matter what it is that we're trying to do, it sometimes proves to be quite a frustration to get that information, and there's no pattern. And in fact, I was having a conversation not that long ago with one of the chaps from Citywire, Will Robbins, and I was in a group. We were at one of their sort of mini conferences, and I was in a group with some other IFAs, and this subject came up, and it was really frustrating when you request certain information from certain providers. And although I'm digressing here, particularly let's say in terms of perhaps a pension transfer scenario, and you get limited information back, or what you get back requires you to answer some more questions because the questions you asked initially haven't been answered. Dealing with emotional issues is not easy. My wife tells me I haven't got a heart, so sometimes it's difficult to prove it to her when I do have it professionally. But you just have to listen, and you know, for me, the fundamental is that clients want a relationship with their advisor where basically they can open up and they can talk and they can say things that they possibly couldn't say to other people. And I think our job is changing in the sense that although we refer to ourselves more so as financial planners these days, I'm trying to adopt more this phrase that a lot of financial advisors use, financial planners use, of more of a lifestyle financial planning position. And the more that we can think ourselves in that position and help people with the stuff that actually is going on in their lives, the easier the job of the financial planning bit becomes. Because really what matters to them is the ability to kind of blurt out what it is they want to talk about. And it could be, in the case of bereavement, really something incredibly hard and harsh for them. It's clearly a lifestyle change for them, but that's the fundamental thing that matters to them. The money is important, but actually secondary. What drives what people do, what happens to them, is what goes on in their lives. And the more we think of it that way, and certainly from my perspective, the more that I address it in that manner, I think it's easier to get over the emotional aspects. And when people do break down, it's easier to look at things and address things from a pragmatic way.